Say hi to Doja, my dog. Hi, come on, lay down. You have to lay down. You cannot be in the video. Okay, so where was I? What's up, guys? You are watching Fite Feed, and today I'm going to be going through my full predictions for the UFC 318 pay-per-view card that's happening this Saturday on July 19th. Before I dive into my full card predictions, just want to give any of you new viewers a quick heads up. If you are new to watching Fite Feed, all of my prediction videos include several different criteria that allow me to make the best and most informed picks that I can. And that includes the tail of the tape, the styles, the momentum check, the intangibles and X factors, and finally, all of those items culminated end up allowing me to make the most informed pick or decision that I have. So those are the things that I go through. Thank you for stopping to my channel. If you're new here, I hope that you guys enjoy this video and will subscribe. And for all of my returning viewers, I love you guys for all your support. Please throw a like on this video if you enjoy. And finally, make sure you comment below. Let me know who you guys are picking in these fights, because there's a lot of matchups that I feel like are a bit, up in the air, if you will. But let's go ahead and dive into the full fight predictions, and I will take us into this now. Starting off this card is going to be Carly Giudice versus Nicole Cagliari. So looking at these two women, you got Giudice, 24 years old, 5'4", 66-inch reach, 125 pounds, 4-2 record overall, 1-1 in the UFC. Cagliari, on the other hand, 28 years old, 5'3", 63-inch reach with a 8-3 record, 0-1 in the UFC. So, both of these women are still pretty young. Not a lot to write home about record-wise. Obviously, Cagliari's got a little bit more experience on her side of things, but I do think that Giudice had a very good showing in her last fight. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where things net out in that regard. Okay, so looking at these two women's strengths, as I mentioned, Giudice got a win in her last fight. She's a solid striker, it seems. She does have a 100% finish rate, all with KOs, but she only has 4 wins, so that's something to keep in mind. Weaknesses, she's still very green, still very young, so we really haven't seen too much from her just yet, and also I think with that, I feel like she could also potentially have a disadvantage in the grappling realm. I'm not too sure on that one, but that could be the case for her. Now, Cagliari, on the other hand, a little bit more experience and a little bit older, but she's a grappling heavy approach. But I would say she also, can kind of get things done either way with a 63% of her wins by KO, but also has 38% of her wins by submission. So she could kind of do whatever she wants to do in that regard. Like, she could keep it on the feet or potentially take it to the ground. I think Giudice is definitely going to try and stay on the feet. Now, weaknesses for Cagliari that I have, she's going to have a bit of a size disadvantage. I think Giudice will be a little bit bigger than her in there. And she also has a tendency to lose by decision. So I feel like given her track record, I think she has 3 decision losses. If things aren't going her way, it seems like that is the way to knock her off or get a win over her, if you will. Taking a look at the momentum check for these two. Giudice has 1 win, Cagliari's got 1 loss, and they both are relatively active. Giudice fought 126 days ago, Cagliari fought 189 days ago, and then just looking at their last 4 fights, you've got several different women here that they've both fought. It looks like they've both had some issues. To be honest with you guys, I'm not even going to read these women's names because a lot of them are not even in the UFC, so we're just going to keep it moving here. I don't know why this keeps doing that. Intangibles and X factors. So the home fighter in this fight is Carly Giudice. She is from Louisiana, so I do think that is going to play a role here, coming off of a big KO. She's going to want to get a win in her hometown. And then also she is just less experienced. So that's a red flag that I call out, guys, because you never know when you don't have a lot of tape on people. I mean, look at John Jones. The guy won't fight Tom Aspinall because he doesn't have enough tape. Now, Cagliari, on the other hand, you've got Cagliari, on the other hand, coming off of a loss. She's a smaller fighter potentially in this fight, and so that's going to play a role here. And I don't know if her striking is on the same level of Giudice. Now, all that said, my pick, guys, if you couldn't tell, oh my fucking God, I fucking hate my life. My pick for this fight is Carly Giudice, solely off the fact that I think, she's the younger fighter here. She's fighting at home, and she does seem to look really good on the feet just based on her last performance. going up against Dubins, it was a really highly touted fighter, especially with some KO power in the hands. And she went out there and was able to knock her off pretty quickly. So I feel Giudice is likely to get a decision or potentially a KO if she can land something big on her opponent here. But I'm definitely leaning more for the decision in this fight, guys. All right, guys. So the next fight on the card, we got Bruno Ferreira, the mini baby Hulk or whatever he calls himself. And then we've got Jackson McVeigh. McVeigh's been trying to get into the UFC octagon for like the last month and a half here. He's had a couple short notice opponents that fell out. He made weight for UFC 317. Here we are, guys. Hopefully 318 works out for Jackson McVeigh. So taking a look at these two, you've got a 32-year-old in Bruno Ferreira versus the 26-year-old in Jackson McVeigh. Now, Bruno Ferreira is baby Hulk, 5'10", 72-inch reach, 185 pounds. 13-2 record overall with a 4-2 record in the UFC. Now Jackson McVeigh, on the other hand, is a little bit longer, a little bit rangier, 6'4" with a 77-inch reach and a 6-0 record overall with a 0-0 record in the UFC because he is debuting. Taking a look at their styles, guys. So the styles for this is that Bruno Ferreira is a very powerful striker. We've seen him in there with some decent talent that is in this middleweight division of the UFC. Does have some great wins over those. Specifically, I think that he had a really cool knockout over Dustin Stoltzfus. Now, I did call out a weakness, though, is that Bruno Ferreira has a tendency to get caught on the feet a bit. I did think that when he fought Stoltzfus, he got hit a little bit too much for my liking, and it definitely made me question, I guess, his skill level, although he is very good and finds ways to get wins, especially by knockout and the highlight reel knockout at that. So now, Jackson McVeigh, on the other hand, I think the biggest thing for him, very tall, long striker. And sorry, guys, looks like this is a little bit cut off. Let me make sure this is not. So, like I was saying, Jackson McVeigh is a taller, more rangy fighter on the feet and has the potential to get he could catch Bruno Ferreira on the feet. He does have a very good clinch game as well. Like I've seen a couple of his KOs come from getting that tie clinch and just throwing knees up the middle. So he definitely has a nice advantage there if you're really looking at the size differential between these two. But the weaknesses for him is that he can be open on the feet and he is inexperienced, not only as a professional with only 6 fights, but also in the UFC, he has never fought anybody, didn't even go up through Contender Series. So those are things to be worried about, I guess, when you're looking at this matchup. And I think that is what leans heavily in my decision-making here as well. Going on to their momentum check. So Bruno Ferreira is coming off 1 loss. He last fought 133 days ago. Sorry, guys. Bruno Ferreira has 1 win, not a loss. It says here he lost. I need to fucking look this shit up now because fucking hate ChatGPT. I fucking hate it. Yeah. Anyways, so this is incorrect. Bruno Ferreira is coming off of a win over Armin Petrosian, and then he had a few losses there, or another loss. 1 loss before that to Magomedov, and then wins over Stoltzfus and Haas before that. And then looking at Jackson McVeigh, he is 6-0, so 6-fight win streak for him. He last fought 36 days ago, so very active. And I want to say once more, he just cut weight for UFC 317. His last 4 fights, to be honest with you guys, not even going to read them because they're really these guys are not guys that are currently in the UFC. So it's hard to compare their resumes with that of like a Bruno Ferreira or someone else that's in the UFC and active. But he does have a 6-fight win streak, which he is riding into this fight. Now, going on to the intangibles and X factors, what I would say for Bruno Ferreira, there is a bit of pressure here because he's welcoming an undefeated young prospect who's hungry to get in there and get a win, improve himself in the UFC. And I think some red flags too is that Bruno Ferreira can definitely be open on the feet at times, especially when he doesn't have the range figured out against a taller opponent, which he's going to be dealing with right off the bat in a 6'4" Jackson McVeigh. Now, Jackson McVeigh, on the other hand, while undefeated, he has a lot of pressure here to not only get a win, get a very convincing win, proving, his place in this UFC middleweight division. But also what I would say for him is keeping that undefeated record has to be top of mind because that's a big deal. So I think he has a lot of pressure there. And then the red flags I have for him is, he just recently fought, which is, I think, can be a good it could be a double-edged sword thing, right? Like he's I don't know, he might be getting back out there too soon. But I think the biggest thing that I feel that I'm keeping it top of mind with Jackson McVeigh is he just made weight at UFC 317. If you guys were keeping up with UFC 317 at all, like all the stuff that happened prior to the fights, Jackson McVeigh was scheduled to fight someone on that fight card. He made weight, his opponent did not. And now that was only 2-3 weeks ago. And so he's turning back around pretty quickly here in trying to, get back out there. I feel like that plays a role while he is a younger fighter. It could be something that impacts his performance on this night, just given that, he's probably done a lot, since then, activity wise, like working out and, just probably burning the candle at both ends, if you will. So ultimately, guys, I have to go with Bruno Ferreira in this fight only because I think, obviously having that UFC strength of schedule compared to that of Jackson McVeigh. Also, the fact that Bruno hasn't been kind of in this weird situation where he's been cutting weight and, preparing for other random opponents. I feel like he's kind of coming into this one a bit more fresh than Jackson McVeigh, who's obviously was, coming on short notice on several fights and had several different matchups pulled together that just never panned out. So I feel like in this case, you're going to have a true test for Jackson McVeigh. I do see Bruno Ferreira kind of employing that game plan that he has where, he's moving forward, trying to get his opponent uncomfortable on the feet, finding openings and landing those big shots. And I feel like if he does land flush, all of those things and all those factors that I said about Jackson McVeigh could come into play here where he gets caught and maybe hurt or knocked out. But Jackson McVeigh, like I said, because he's untested, we don't have too much in terms of footage on him. And the footage we do have on him, he's beating lower level opposition. So it'll be very interesting to see. Perhaps Jackson McVeigh isn't going to have these issues, and maybe he goes out there and he gets the win. We'll have to see what happens. But I am excited for this matchup. The next fight on the card, we got Ryan Spann versus Lucas Brzeski. Now this fight, guys, I tussled with this one a little bit, but we got Ryan Spann, 33 years old, 6'5", 79-inch reach with a 249-pound weight, 22-11 overall with an 8-6 record in the UFC. Lucas Brzeski, 33, 6'4", 78.3 inches in reach. I don't know where the 0.3 comes from, but funny. 234 pounds, 9-6 record overall with a 1-5 record in the UFC. So not too much success for Lucas in the UFC. Now, looking at Ryan Spann's strengths, weaknesses, their styles overall, we've got Ryan Spann has like really good reach and speed. I would say even at heavyweight, he definitely has, that potential to catch his opponent on the feet. But he also has some sneaky subs, guys. Like this guy has 59% of his wins by submission. He could definitely latch up something and potentially catch Lucas Brzeski in a submission. Some weaknesses, he suffered bad KO losses in his career, especially recently at heavyweight. He had no success at heavyweight. He got starched out cold by Waldo Cortez Acosta. So I just think that when we look at it that way, he definitely has the tendency to get caught and hurt on the feet. And then looking at Lucas Brzeski, on the other hand, this guy, he's got KO power because 56% of his wins are by KO, with a slight submission threat himself at 22% of wins by submission. But Lucas Brzeski, really, guys, he's Lucas Brzeski. That's a weakness, in my opinion. The guy has not shown to be a performer out there and had some pretty bad losses recently. I'm just truly, to be honest with you guys, just not very impressed overall. And I think that is something to keep in mind. Now, looking at their momentum. So we have Ryan Spann coming off of a loss and Lucas coming off of 2 losses. Ryan Spann last fought 126 days ago and Lucas fought 225 days ago. So there is a bit of worry there. Ryan Spann coming off a bad KO loss and kind of getting right back in there could be questionable in terms of how much he's recovered. Looking at their last 4 fights, you have a loss to Cortez Acosta for Ryan Spann, a win over St. Preux, and then a loss to Guskov and a loss to Smith at light heavyweight. Now, that doesn't age very well. Now, looking at Brzeski, he lost to Kennedy Nzechukwu and then lost to Mick Parkin, both by KO. And then he had a win over Valter Walker and a loss to Cortez Acosta. So right there, I mean, these two are both, in this position where I think they both are in need of a win drastically. Now, looking at intangibles and X factors, Ryan Spann is not the home fighter, neither is Lucas Brzeski. The pressure for Ryan Spann, guys, is he needs to get a win at heavyweight. His last showing was not something to write home about. Obviously, he got KO'd pretty early. Well, he's just vulnerable to these power strikes. That's like a huge red flag for me because when he gets caught, he sometimes just loses all momentum that he might build in that fight. And then Lucas Brzeski, on the other hand, I think just for him, multiple losses in a row really hasn't shown too much in the UFC in terms of skill, like his skill level and his ability to take out like higher level opposition. I would say red flags is just on the feet. He's open on the feet. He gets caught on the feet quite a bit and dropped or even finished. And so I feel like in this matchup, guys, it's like the two lower level fighters, who's going to get the best, right? And I think when I look at overall, just while Ryan Spann's lost to a lot of different people, he also has some sneaky wins on his record. And so that is why I'm picking Ryan Spann in this fight. I feel like he is the more talented and skilled fighter, but I don't think he is by a like country mile, if you will. I think that he is just better in this case, but even if it's a slight advantage in his favor. I do think that the size of Lucas Brzeski is going to help him because I think Ryan Spann tends to, especially at light heavyweight, get wins over guys just by being a bit bigger than them. Now, in this fight, I think Ryan Spann might get a KO, but he could also latch up a sneaky guillotine, which he likes to use a lot. So we'll have to see what happens. The next fight on the card, we've got Jimmy Crute versus Marcin Prachnio. So Jimmy Crute, 29 years old, 6'2", height, a 74-inch reach, a 205 pounds in weight, and then 12-4 overall in professional record with a 4-4 record in the UFC. Marcin Prachnio, on the other hand, 37 years old, 6'3" tall, 74-inch reach with a 17-8 record, 4-6 record in the UFC. Taking looking at these guys' styles. So you've got Jimmy Crute. He's got a well-rounded game. 42% of his wins are by KO and 33% of his wins are by submission. Some weaknesses for Jimmy Crute. Just tends to be outstruck on the feet. And I feel like a lot of times when that's happening for him, he can really lose steam and momentum, and then he'll kind of really push one part of his game. For instance, if he's getting outstruck, he might really push hard to get those takedowns and not mix them up well. So that's a weakness I see for Jimmy Crute. And then for Marcin, I think looking at his striking style and his strengths, he is a very dominant striker, 65% of his wins by KO. So he is a flashy striker looking to get a finish on the feet. Now, weaknesses for him, he can also be open on the feet quite a bit, not always very defensively sound, but also I think from a grappling perspective, tends to be out-grappled by most of his opponents that have even just the slightest skill of grappling. So that's a bit of a weakness that I would call out there. Now, their momentum check, they're both coming off of, well, actually, Jimmy Crute is coming off of a loss, but not in his last fight. He last fought 162 days ago, and he got a draw with Bellato. Now, Marcin Prachnio last fought 358 days ago, and he lost to Bukauskas. That was a great fight. That Prachnio actually landed a head kick from super close and almost like KO'd Bukauskas, which was crazy. But for the most part, he was just getting controlled that entire fight, and ends up getting, I think, submitted in that fight. So intangibles and X factors for these guys. So looking at Jimmy Crute, obviously he's going to have some pressure here to get a win. He needs to get a win because his last 4 fights, guys, have been super close or a draw. Or no, I'm sorry, they've been super close and gone to a draw, or he's lost those fights. So definitely needs to get a win. Some red flags is just he was previously super strong, I think, coming into the UFC, and then suddenly it just seemed like things really didn't go his way in a lot of the matchmaking. He's either lost, had very close fights, just hasn't really been able to edge out any type of win in his own favor. And so I think that is something that's a bit worrisome in this matchup. Now, Prachnio, on the other hand, he needs to get a win just to keep his, not only his position in the UFC, but I think if he doesn't get a win, he could be, at risk of maybe even being cut, just given that his age, he's getting up there. I would say for him, though, he is more hit or miss. Just has a win, a loss, win, and loss. He's just hit or miss, hot and cold, not always consistent in these matchups that he gets. And finally, that leads to my pick, guys. I am leaning Jimmy Crute, but I do feel like this fight, guys, could definitely go, his way, because I just feel like with Jimmy Crute, I don't always have confidence that he'll be able to deploy that game plan and take control of the fight. I feel like it could go Prachnio's way based on what Jimmy Crute shows up. Now, if this is the Jimmy Crute who goes out there is a marauder, you know, stringing together some combinations on the feet, catching Prochazino. He is the more youthful fighter, so I think that's going to lean heavily in his favor here. But like I said, this could easily go Pino's way. So if any of you are looking for a dog, I would look at Prochazino. All right, the next fight on the card, we got Adam Mo-Fugit, boy. You got to fug it, you know what I'm saying? And then we got Islam Dulatov. So Adam Fugit is 36 years old, 6'1", 77-inch reach, welterweight bout at 170 pounds, 10-4 record with a 2-2 record in the UFC. Dulatov, 26, 6'3", 75-inch reach with a 11-1 record, 0-0 record in the UFC because he's debuting. So this guy's a little bit bigger though, a little bit taller, a little bit longer. Now taking a look at their styles. So I feel Adam Fugit has a very strong striking and grappling background. Okay, have fun. Adam Fugit's a strong striker. He's kind of a mix of both. He gets, you know, some wins by submission, some wins by KO. 3 submission wins overall. And then looking at his weaknesses, he definitely tends to lose to strikers that are a bit more powerful or even just bigger than him. And like you'll see, like my case in point with Michael Morales getting a win over him. But Islam Dulatov, on the other hand, strengths. He's a very powerful striker. 55% of his wins are by KO. Sneaky grappler too, with 45% of his wins by submission. Some weaknesses for Dulatov is he's still untested in the UFC. He hasn't fought anyone yet in the UFC. He only got 1 win on Contender Series, and that opponent was also not in the UFC. So jumping into momentum. So Fugit's got a 1-win streak here. Last fought 400 days ago. He did get a win over Josh Quinlan, which was a decent win at the time, but I don't know if it's really aged that well. Previously, though, lost to Malak, got a win over Kinoshita, and then a loss to Michael Morales. So, like I said, when he's gone up against guys who are either like the same size or a little bit bigger than him, I feel like they tend to have more success on the feet. Now, Dulatov, 11-fight win streak, last fought 285 days ago. He has wins over several folks. Like I said, one of them being that guy in the Contender Series. And these are pretty dominant wins, all by finish, I believe, in these fights. So jumping into the intangibles and X factors. So for Fugit, he just needs a win, I think, to get over this hot prospect. I think this could help him continue to position himself in the UFC and potentially get him some better matchups in this division. But outside of that, I said, like, the red flags for him is just he has trouble with those taller, rangier strikers. Now, Dulatov, on the other hand, he's not the home fighter, but he's going to have a lot more pressure to go out there and be that young prospect who wants to get a statement win in his UFC debut. And the red flag there is that he's just not tested in the UFC. Now, given all of that, guys, I just don't think that Fugit is as good as Dulatov based on watching their performances. And so I feel Islam Dulatov will get the win in this fight. I just think he's the more skilled fighter, and he's also going to have not only the youth advantage, but also the size advantage as well. The next fight on the card, we've got Ateba Gaudier versus Robert Valentin. So this one was a bit interesting, guys, but you got a 23-year-old in Gaudier, 6'4" with an 81-inch reach, 186 pounds, 7-1 record with a 1-0 record in the UFC. Valentin, on the other hand, is 30 years old, 6'2" with a 77-inch reach, and a 10-5 record overall with an 0-2 record in the UFC. Styles for this fight, Ateba is a very powerful striker, very fast on the feet. 86% of his wins by KO says it all. Really, his weaknesses, in my opinion, are just he lacks UFC experience. He definitely has the tendency to get caught on the feet too. I think when he's throwing some of his strikes, he has a bit of an open defense there, where I think that's one area, but it's a very loose area, because I do think that sometimes his power is so good in that he's able to land his shots, and it's almost like he doesn't even need to have that defense. But one thing that I would call out for Gaudier is just that he is 23 and still very young, and some of those holes that we might see in his game just haven't yet been exposed, I would say, because he just hasn't gone up against some of the upper echelon of the division. Now, Valentin, on the other hand, 30% of his wins are by KO, 60% of his wins by submission. So sneaky submission for this guy. Even though he's been out grappled, he has that tendency or that ability to get submissions. And that, I think, is something that we should be a bit worried about against Gaudier, because Gaudier really hasn't been tested in that regard. The thing that I would say is a weakness for Robert Valentin based off previous performances is just does not do well with grapplers. So not really something to call out here, because Gaudier is not one to grapple. Momentum check. So Gaudier, 6-fight win streak. 112 days ago is when he last fought. he's got a win over Medina and then wins over a couple other guys that are not in the UFC. Now, Robert Valentin, 2-loss streak, last fought 105 days ago, lost to Torres Finney in a pretty boring fight, tried to do his best, but just got manhandled. And then I think when he fought Ryan Loder, it was a similar ordeal where Loder was just able to deploy that wrestling and just he couldn't do anything about it. Then he had wins on the not contender series, but professional wins elsewhere outside of the UFC prior to that. Now, jumping into intangibles and X factors, Gautier is not the home fighter, not too much pressure either. He did get that debut out of the way, so he was able to get the win there. But I do think that for him to continue to driving off that momentum, he's just got to get another win here. And if he is able to get a KO win, that is even better for him. Now, some red flags to call out is I do kind of worry about Gautier and his pressure, especially when he's going for the kill, because he is one of these fighters that, you know, he's actually from Cameroon, but I feel like he has a similar build of Francis Ngannou where he's just like yoked as fuck. And I think that that's something to worry about because when he's going for a finish, especially with a lot of intention, that could turn into him gassing out and this fight, you know, not going his way in the later rounds. Now, looking at Robert Valentin, I think that he has a lot of pressure, guys. He needs to get a win here or he's likely to be cut from the UFC, just given that he's had no success yet in the UFC. He did have a few good wins on not the contender series, on the Ultimate Fighter, but it'll be interesting to see, you know, what that pressure does for him. Does that help him? Does that push him to get the win? Now, red flags is just he hasn't been able to get it done in the UFC, and now he's going up against a prospect who has power in his hands with the ability to KO him. So that's going to be very hard to, you know, look past, in my opinion. And I think that is why, guys, I have to ride with Gautier on this one. I think Gautier is riding all the momentum, and he has all those physical tools to, you know, even if he's not able to KO Robert Valentin, I think that he has the potential to at least hurt him enough to where he could control the fight from start to finish. I don't think Valentin's necessarily a guy who's very easy to finish, especially just from like a KO perspective. I know Ryan Loder was able to get him, but that was more of, I think, him being trapped in a grappling situation than it was the striking. But we'll have to see, guys, because Gautier, like I said, very untested in the UFC, and Robert Valentin has those sneaky submissions. So this is another one where it's like, this could go the dog's way, if you know what I'm saying. Going on to the next fight, we've got Francisco Prado versus Nikolai Vereteknikov. Francisco Prado is 23 years old, 5'10", 69.3 inch reach, another 0.3 there, 175, 170.5 pounds, 12-3 record with a 1-3 record in the UFC. Nikolai, 35, 6'1", 76 inch reach, 12-6 record with an 0-2 record in the UFC. Styles for this fight. Prado, well-rounded MMA game. 50% of his wins are by KO and 50% are by sub. A 100% finish rate for Francisco Prado. Now, weaknesses for him is just like, it seems like he can seem to lose control of fights, especially when he's a bit smaller than his opponent. And unfortunately for Francisco Prado, he was formerly a lightweight, and he's only fought at welterweight in the UFC. So you start to question a bit like that size disadvantage. Is he having issues in these fights due to his opponents just being physically more imposing and having strong, like, you know, more strength than he does? That could be and play a big role in, you know, him losing some of these fights. Now, looking at Veretikhinov, on the other hand, 75% of his wins by KO. Definitely a decent frame for lightweight, or for welterweight, being that he is 6'1". He's a little bit taller, a little bit longer reach, but he is a bit older for welterweight, and that's a weakness I'm going to call out because he is 35 years old, and he doesn't seem to do very well with strong grapplers. Now, going into their momentum check. So Francisco Prado and Veretikhinov are coming off of 2 losses apiece. 161 days ago, Francisco Prado fought. 147 days ago for Veretikhinov. They're, you know, very close in terms of their activity there. Looking at their last 4 fights, this is where I think that Prado gets a feather in the cap. His last 4 fights have been with very good guys. Matthews, Zellhuber, Azaitar. Azaitar, I don't know if he's that great, but Malarkey, Zellhuber, and Matthews have all kind of been proven and tested in the UFC. He does have losses to them, but he did not get finished against those guys, so that is a big feather in his cap. Now, Veretikinov, 2-loss streak. Like I said, I lost to Austin Vanderford, and then lost to Danny Barlow. I had a couple wins prior to that. But overall, when we look at his loss to Vanderford, he did get finished. So that is something to call out. Now, looking at their intangibles and X factors, we've got Prado, who's got that pressure to get a win, because I think that either one of these guys gets another loss, it's likely that they could be cut from the UFC, just given that they've had multiple losses. Now, red flags for Prado is just he's 0-3 in decision. So I feel like if this fight starts to go the way of Veretikinov, like, I don't know if he'll be able to find his way out of losing by decision. So that's something that is a bit worrisome for me. Now, Veretikinov, he's coming off of a couple losses and a couple bad losses at that in UFC. And I think that he can just be easily out-grappled. So worried there for him. And I will say, guys, I think that this is another weird situation. I was really mulling over choosing Veretikinov mainly because I feel like he has the striking ability to keep Prado at bay and maybe out-style him on the feet. But where I worry about that is just that it's like he, against some of these recent fights, or fighters, he just hasn't been able to pull it together. And ultimately, I just feel like Prado will have better skill in there when it comes to the striking and mixing things up. Now, keep in mind, though, Prado's still young and Veretikinov's, 35. So you're going to have like a lot more of that man strength compared to like the young man strength. So that could play a role. I do think that Veretikinov has a chance to win this fight just solely off of size, but I do think Prado is the more skilled fighter, and that's why I'm going with him to win. Next fight on the card, Marvin Vettori versus Brendan Allen. 31 years old for Marvin Vettori, 6 foot tall, 74-inch reach, 185 pounds, obviously. Record 19-7 with a 9-6 record in the UFC. And then taking a look at Brendan Allen, 29 years old, just a little bit younger, 6'2", 75-inch reach, 24-7 record with a 12-4 record in the UFC. Looking at their styles, so I would say these guys are both grapplers. Obviously, I think big things to call for Marvin Vettori. The guy has a granite chin. Even after fighting some of the strongest strikers in the UFC, he still was standing, didn't get KO'd. So I think he's very durable, and he can also be very scrappy in some of these striking exchanges. He is a southpaw, so he can mix it up a bit and make it a bit confusing for his opponents on the feet. And then also very strong wrestling and chain wrestling, grappling, very good at controlling opponents in that regard. Now, weaknesses for him, he isn't the best striker, and he's also not like the best or most threatening submission artist either. And he's also taken a lot of damage in his recent fights. Now, Brendan Allen, on the other hand, very strong grappler. 57% of his wins are by submission. He's not too tricky on the feet, guys. Like, not a guy I would expect to get a KO, to be honest with you. If anything, I actually see Brendan Allen getting KO'd before I would see him getting a KO. And I would say weaknesses for him is just he can be very open to counter shots on the feet and chinny. Like, I feel like once opponents land flush on him, he gets hurt pretty badly. So just things to think about in that regard. Now, looking at momentum check, they're both coming off of a 2-loss streak, 100, and they also both tried to fight in public at the fucking casino. And I think Marvin Vettori proved he's got some good head movement, at least in that exchange anyways. Now, Vettori last fought 126 days ago. Allen fought 147 days ago, so both of them pretty active, really, if you kind of boil it down that way. Now, last 4 fights, you've got Marvin Vettori losing to Dolidze in a close fight. It was a rematch where he had won the previous one. Then a loss to Jared Cannonier, which at first was close because Vettori hurt Cannonier on the feet, which shocked me, guys. Like, I think he knocked Cannonier down or hurt him badly, which was fucking shocking. But then he got a win over Dolidze and a loss to Whitaker. Why the fuck does that say? God damn it, guys. Sorry. Anyways, looking at Brendan Allen, a loss to Anthony Hernandez and a loss to Imavov with a win over Curtis and a win over Craig. I don't believe he beat Curtis. I thought Curtis won that fight. So next thing to look at is the intangibles and X factors. So we've got a few here. Marvin Vettori's not the home fighter, but guys, his brother just recently passed away, which I want to say I apologize. And you have my condolences, because that's fucking horrible to lose a sibling like that, especially one that, it seemed like his brother was in good shape and in good health. It's just he had a fire had broken out and he died from smoke inhalation, which is just awful. So I really feel for Marvin Vettori in that regard. And I think I'm putting pressure there because not only does he want to get a W and break this losing streak, but he has said in interviews he's dedicating this fight to his brother who just passed away. So there's a lot riding there for him. And the red flag I have for Vettori really is just open on the feet. I'm not worried too much about him getting submitted, even though maybe I should be a little bit more worried. I just feel like Vettori has that grappling prowess where even if Brendan Allen has a bigger submission threat, he can work his way out of it, especially just given that he has a lot of that grappling acumen on his side. Now, Brendan Allen, on the other hand, pressure for him. He's the home fighter. He's from Louisiana. I think he was born in a different state, but he grew up in Louisiana and he's fighting there. So I think that's a huge, huge pressure for him to get a win in his hometown, especially working and seeing that Dustin Poirier is right there on the main card. He's going to want to get a win for Poirier too. Just stand up, get it done for Nola in Louisiana. I would say the other pressure is that he had bad blood with Vettori, and like if we mix in like all that drama where he swung and threw punches at Vettori but didn't connect, I think that is there's a lot riding there. So it's like they're gonna go into this fight with some bad blood, guys. Now, red flags, same things I've called out already. Brendan Allen is just chinny on the feet, and he has like this uncanny way of losing fights and losing control of fights than losing the fight overall. Like Brendan Allen could like be winning a fight and then randomly like some shit happens and he just ends up like completely somehow losing. Like I don't know how to explain it other than that. But ultimately, guys, I've got to go Marvin Vettori. I'm mainly picking Marvin Vettori because I feel like his durability and his grappling prowess will keep that submission attempts at bay. And I think that he'll just be able to, chain wrestle, potentially just gain control of this fight. I see him getting a decision. He could get a KO, though, because Vettori has shown some sneaky power in his hands, especially hurting Jared Cannonier. But, guys, when you look at this, I think Brendan Allen's likely the favorite. So I think that I wouldn't look past Brendan Allen potentially winning the fight if he's able to get a couple submissions up or even get a submission in general. But I'm feeling like Vettori is like unfinishable at this point. And I don't think Brendan Allen's going to be the guy to do that. And I feel like when you look at a decision-based mindset, I feel like, yes, Brendan Allen's going to have some clout there being from Louisiana, but I think Vettori is going to prove to be just the more well-rounded fighter. He's fought better competition in the UFC, with a loss to Whitaker, 2 losses to Adesanya. Like he's fought the who's who of this division. And I just think that is going to play huge in this fight and in Vettori potentially getting a win. Next fight on the card, Kyler Phillips versus Vinicius Oliveira. So we got Kyler Phillips, 30 years old, 5'8", 72-inch reach, 135 pounds, 12-3 record with a 6-2 record in the UFC. Oliveira, 29, 5'9", 70.5 reach, 135 pounds, 22-3 record with a 3-0 record in the UFC. So Kyler Phillips, guys, 42% of his wins by KO. Very talented and very quick on the feet. Very, very good with his combinations. He's able to mix in those kicks as well. His nickname's the Matrix because he's red pilling this bitch, I guess. Weaknesses for him, he does not do that well with pressure. I feel like when he's been pressured, especially in his last fight against Rob Font kind of showed holes in his game where it's like, if I'm pumping the jab at you and pressuring you the whole time, how are you going to deal with it? And he didn't have any answers. So that's something to be worried about, especially against Oliveira, who has 73% of his wins by KO and solid all around just kickboxing and can mix in that grappling. But I think some weaknesses for Oliveira, he can be open on the feet. And I believe his only losses have been by KO, I believe, or he's at least had 1 KO. So those are things to be thinking about. And I also call out Oliveira he did get a finish in his debut, but he didn't look as good as I think he probably should have, I guess, given his current strength of schedule, given that he's, a Brazilian fighter. I just feel like he did not perform as what people thought he would in that debut. And the debut fight was against a guy who's just not very high level either. Momentum check for these guys. So 1 loss for Kyler Phillips, 5 wins for Vinicius Oliveira. Kyler Phillips, not a very active guy. Last fought 273 days ago. He lost to Rob Font. Sorry, guys, this is fucked up again. It is what it is. Anyways, Vinicius Oliveira, last fought 168 days ago, so definitely more active than Kyler. And he has wins over Nurmagomedov, Said Nurmagomedov, and Ricky Simone, which are great wins in this division. So just calling that out. Intangibles and X factors for this, you've got Kyler Phillips has pressure to get that W so he can move up the rankings a bit. I think at this point, Vinicius might be a little bit higher than him. And red flags, he just hasn't dealt well with pressure from his previous opponents. Other variables, though, is Kyler Phillips has never been finished. So looking at Vinicius Oliveira, not a lot of pressure for him really, other than to continue this momentum that he's on with a 5-fight win streak. I do think he's had issues in the past fights where even with lower level opposition, they're finding success on the feet, which is not a good sign against a guy like Kyler Phillips, because that is where Kyler Phillips is going to have success if you allow it. But what I will say, guys, I'm picking Vinicius Oliveira solely off the fact that I think he's going to have a bit of a size advantage. I think that he has that strong pressure style that is going to be very difficult for Kyler Phillips to deal with. But I think Kyler Phillips, I imagine he is working out to be a bit of an underdog. He does have that tendency and that skill level to also outclass an opponent, given that he's a very talented striker. Now, like I said, I think Vinicius Oliveira is going to get the win, but it could go either way. Jumping into the next fight, we got Michael Johnson versus Daniel Zellhuber. So Michael Johnson's 39 years old, 5'10", 73.5-inch reach, 23-19 record with a 15-15 record in the UFC. That's fucking nuts. Now, Zellhuber, on the other hand, 26 years old, 6'1" with a 77-inch reach, 15-2 record with 3-2 record in the UFC. Styles for this fight. Both guys are very good strikers. Michael Johnson, the southpaw, was very solid boxing and very traditional, but solid traditional boxing style. Has the hooks, has the straights, can kind of land at will. Good uppercuts too, and good body work that he puts out there. So I really like Michael Johnson's ability and his ability to box. 43% of his wins by KO. Weaknesses for Michael Johnson, guys. He has a tendency to get caught on the feet. And not just caught like, oh, you hurt me, like caught and put to sleep. So that is something I worry about with Michael Johnson. Now, looking at Daniel Zellhuber, he has 47% of his wins by KO. He's a very fast and technical striker. And he's been through some wars. Like he just had a war with Ribovic in his last fight. Now, what I would say is that... Say hi to Doja, my dog. Hi. Come on. Lay down. You have to lay down. You cannot be in the video. Okay, so... Where was I? Zellhuber. I think that for Zellhuber, he can be open on the feet, guys. We saw this in the Ribovic fight. He got hurt quite a few times. Something to be worried about, especially against a sneaky, powerful, and fast striker in Michael Johnson. But I think him having that youth advantage is going to be helpful for him. Now, jumping down into the momentum here. These guys, Michael Johnson, 39 years old, but also has a bit of momentum with a 2-fight win streak. Last fought 217 days ago. Don't look at the last 4 fights, guys. I'm sorry. Just don't fucking look at it. Now, Daniel Zellhuber, on the other hand, 1-fight loss. He lost to Ribovic at UFC Noche. And if you guys remember, UFC Noche at the Sphere, for whatever reason, I feel like the Mexican fighters did not do very well that night. There's something in the air or the water. Anyways, he last fought Ribovic, lost, but he had wins over Prado, Yagos, and Venata before that. So those are solid wins. Zellhuber's definitely proven himself to be a force in this division. Now, jumping down to intangibles and X factors. Michael Johnson, 39 years old, guys. He's got pressure to get a win because he's on a 2-fight win streak. And as an aging fighter, I think for him to continue to punch that ticket, stay in the UFC, he has to keep winning, I think. But that leads to red flags. He's 39 years old, and that is a big red flag for me, guys, like especially at 155 pounds. Now, there's outliers in every division, but I just think that is something that I'm worried about for Michael Johnson. Now, Daniel Zellhuber, for him, the pressure is that, he's going to want to get a win. He's got a long layoff here, almost a full year off. And I think he is going to want to get back in that win column, especially as the younger fighter. I think the biggest red flags is he can be caught on the feet. I've already said this. Now, I'm going Zellhuber, and it's solely off the fact that I feel like he is a talented lightweight. And I think that Michael Johnson has not been paired up with guys that are the size of Zellhuber in recent matchups. And I think that when you compare that size advantage that Zellhuber will have and the youth advantage, those are things that are going to knock down the chances of Michael Johnson actually able to get a win here. Not to say, though, I think Michael Johnson has speed, guys. He has sneaky speed and sneaky power that could potentially catch Zellhuber and maybe even get a win by KO. So, I mean, if you guys are feeling risky, you could even throw a little sprinkle on the fucking Michael Johnson for KO. But you do what you feel like. I would not recommend betting on any of that because I feel like it's a fucking farce. You're gonna lose. And the next fight on the card, we got Dan Ige versus Patricio Pitbull. Dan Ige is 33 years old, 5'7", 71-inch reach, 146 pounds, 19-9 record with an 11-8 record in the UFC. Patricio Pitbull, 38 years old, 5'6", 65.5-inch reach, a 36-8 record with an 0-1 record in the UFC. Looking at their strengths, I think Dan Ige is the epitome of like an all-around fighter. Great all-around game. 37% of his wins by KO, but he's got some submissions. He's also got a lot of decisions. Dan Ige is just a very well-rounded fighter. Some weaknesses for him. I feel like he's been able to win a lot of these fights, but also he loses these fights where he might have control, but he gets outstruck by his opponent. And it's like, I feel like when he's in these close fights, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to go his way. Now, Patricio Pitbull, on the other hand, the strengths that I would have for him is he is also very well-rounded. 33% of his wins by KO, 33% of his wins by sub, and then 33% of his wins by decision. So he is like the epitome of like, I can do it all type of thing, right? Weaknesses for Patricio Pitbull. Hey, Dior, what are you doing? Anyways, weaknesses for Patricio Pitbull is that he's open on the feet and he's had a string of really bad KO losses, guys, like and pretty recently, mind you. Now, jumping into their momentum check, 2-loss fucking hell. Guys, don't pay attention to the last 4 fights. The last fight that Dan Ige had was a win over Charles Woodson. Is his name Charles? Oh, fuck, man. I'm tired. Sean Woodson. Fuck. But they both last fought 98 days ago. We've got I think Dan Ige has a 1-fight win streak, if I'm not mistaken. It could be 2. Here I am fucking I need to get a goddamn proofreader, man. Yep, 1-fight win streak for Dan Ige. And guys, I'm just going to be real with you. Like, looking at Patricio, I got to say, and I'm sorry if this hurts people's feelings, I am not sold on the Patricio Pitbull hype train. Like, I get this guy's done great things in his career, but he's 38 years old, and like, I just don't see him finding that success in the UFC. I really don't. That's just my opinion. Like, I think he's had a well-storied career, done a lot of things. I just don't think that that's going to help him in these matchups in the UFC, especially in the upper echelon of the talent that he's getting into here. Looking at the intangibles and X factors here. So what I wrote down for this, guys, is just there's not a lot of pressure for Dan Ige here. I think, he's coming off of a pretty good win against Sean Woodson. And I think that the only red flag I would say for Dan Ige is just, like I said before, when fights are close, he somehow finds a way, even if it's not by his choice, like he loses decisions. So it's like, I feel like that plays a role in his dominance. I think he has to have a more dominant role in this fight to get that win if it goes that way. Now, Patricio, on the other hand, he's got pressure to get a ranked win so he can get ranked in this division. But I think he also has that pressure of, being that 38-year-old fighter and getting a win in general. Because, if he's going 0-2 or 0-3 in the UFC, it's likely he'll be cut. And what I would say here is just he's 38 years old. He's also just not fought the level of talent that Dan Ige has. Ultimately, guys, I am going 50K Dan Ige. I feel like Dan Ige will actually be able to find a KO here. Although Dan Ige tends to get decisions too, I think that he has a strong chance of catching Patricio given Patricio's mileage and age. So that is my opinion. I'm going with Dan Ige. Next fight on the card, Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez. So Kevin Holland's 32 years old, 6'3", 81-inch reach, 28-13 record with a 15-10 record in the UFC. That is fucking crazy, yo. I don't ever want to fucking hear Ian Gary's bitch ass say, Kevin Hall, I'm the most fucking active light welterweight other than Alexi Pereira. Like, bullshit, bro. Fucking Kevin Holland. Like, you last fought in April. This dude's about to fight for the second time since then. And I think Kevin Holland fought before that too. So, fuck out of here. Anyways, Daniel Rodriguez, 38 years old, 6'1", 74-inch reach, 19-5 record with a 9-4 record in the UFC. Looking at their strengths, these guys, this is a striker's delight. Like, you've got two guys with both a 46% or higher KO rate, a 36% of their wins by sub on Kevin Holland, and 21% of the wins by sub for Daniel Rodriguez. I don't think we've seen much of that from Daniel Rodriguez in the UFC, though. Weaknesses I have for Kevin Holland, Honestly, guys, the weaknesses that Kevin Holland has is just like he has this tendency to be out grappled by guys who are bigger than him. And in this case, that's not going to happen. And I think Daniel Rodriguez has a similar weakness. And I think that's a worrisome attribute because Kevin Holland will be the bigger fighter in this fight and has that ability to latch up submissions or even just out grapple in general. Momentum check. Both guys are coming off of a 2-fight win streak. Kevin Holland last fought 42 days ago. Daniel Rodriguez last fought 77 days ago. And then looking at their last 4 fights, hopefully I fucking updated this. I did. You've got Kevin Holland with a win over Luque and a win over Nelson, both pretty dominant wins in my opinion. A loss to DeRitter and a loss to Dewedze prior to that. So that's like the big grappler thing, right? Now, last 4 fights for Daniel Rodriguez. Ponzinibbio, he got a win over, nice, huge KO over Ponzinibbio back in May. And then a win over Morono, which was a split decision, so very close. And I think looking at D-Rod, he had a loss to Gastelum from a grappling perspective. That's really where the fight was. Gary also caught him with a head kick and was able to finish him. Now, intangibles and X factors. So what I would say in this fight, guys, is like the pressure for Kevin Holland is just to hold his spot in the rankings, get another W, and continue moving up that win column. Now, red flags for Holland. He has been on a bit of a tear, but he's also been very active. So that could play a role in maybe him dropping the ball. But also I think Kevin Holland has shown some issues when he's gone up against really solid boxers like that of JDM. Now I'm not saying that D-Rod's on the same level as JDM, but D-Rod definitely has a very skilled boxing style. Now, on the side of D-Rod, pressure for him is just also to maintain his spot or keep growing at welterweight, get a big win over Kevin Holland, who's a fan favorite. Red flags I have for Daniel Rodriguez. Not only can he be out grappled, but feel like when he's fought guys that are similar in size and stature to Kevin Holland, like an Ian Gary, he ends up getting caught or having issues. Now, that's just one example, but I have to compare the fact that Ian Gary and Kevin Holland are the same height, and Kevin Holland has a longer reach. So that is probably likely to pose problems for D-Rod. And ultimately, I have to say, from a grappling perspective, I think Kevin Holland is a very skilled grappler, and he's going to have that size advantage, the youth advantage. I think Kevin Holland's going to get this one done, guys. And I actually see it being done by submission because I think Kevin Holland can just mix it up better. He might have a chance of, dropping D-Rod and then throwing up a submission on him. Kevin Holland has that sneaky power that people don't seem to respect, and they end up paying the price. So going Kevin Holland. The next fight and the co-main event of the evening, we've got Paulo Costa versus Roman Kopylov. Both guys are 34, 6'1" for Costa, 6 foot tall for Kopylov. We've got 79-inch reach for Costa and not an 83-inch reach for motherfucking Kopylov. Fuck. A 75-inch reach for Kopylov, not fucking 83. Sorry, guys. I feel like I have to say that a lot. I'm just saying I might have to switch this up, guys, because, I really enjoy pulling this together. And I have seen an increase in views, which I appreciate. But it is a lot of info I have to gather. And AI fucking sucks, by the way. Now, let's go ahead and jump into styles. So, looking at Paulo Costa, 79% of his wins by KO. But, guys, we really haven't seen that in so long. And he's so inactive. I feel like his weakness is his inactivity. Like, being that he's a younger guy, like 34, he's not that old. Like, I feel like he needs to be way more active than he is. Now, Kopylov on the other side has 86% of his wins by KO. I would say a big weakness for him, though, is he just doesn't seem to deal with grapplers and very strong grapplers that well, given that we saw Anthony Hernandez just kind of manhandle him. Just not a good sign in terms of that weakness. Now, momentum check. Paulo Costa's riding a 2-loss streak while Kopylov's on a 2-fight win streak. And like I said, Paulo Costa last fought 414 days ago. He had a loss to Sean Strickland, a loss to Whitaker. Both very good talents. A win over Rockhold, but that was way too close for comfort, in my opinion. And now last 4 fights for Kopylov, even though Kopylov fought 189 days ago, has a win over Chris Curtis, a win over Almeida, and a loss to Hernandez and a win over Frem. So just more success for Kopylov. Like, these guys have polar opposites here. You've got loss, loss, win, loss, win, win, loss, win. Now, jumping in to the intangibles and X factors. I think Paulo Costa has a lot of pressure here, guys, to get a win, or he's riding a 3-fight loss streak. while also being very inactive and hot and cold with his fights. I just feel like he also has a lot of questionable losses, which is a red flag for me. Kopylov, on the other hand, pressure to maintain that current momentum. And I think a red flag for him is that he can be open on the feet at times. Not a good sign going up against a guy with power that Paulo Costa has. But I don't know how much that is even showing in Paulo's fights as of recent. Ultimately, guys, I've got to go Kopylov. Just his ability to be more active and just is a better fighter overall. I love Paulo Costa. He's fun, but he just doesn't fight enough for me. And I feel like it's worrisome to have him going up against a guy as skilled as Kopylov is in the striking department. I see this going to decision, in my opinion, but it could go either way. It could go KO, and you might get a sneaky, maybe Costa catches him. I don't know, but I think Kopylov, if it's going to go anyway, I think Kopylov's either getting a decision or a KO win. The next fight and the final fight of UFC 318, we've got Max the Blessed Expressed Holloway versus Dustin the Diamond Poirier. Now, looking at this fight, guys, this is a trilogy matchup. We've got Max 33, Dustin 36, Max 5'11", Dustin 5'9". 69-inch reach, got the little T-Rex arms for Max Holloway, 73-inch reach for Dustin Poirier, 26-8 record for Max Holloway, 30-9 record for Dustin Poirier. And one of my favorite things that I've uncovered, they are both 22-8 in the UFC. Both have 30 fights in the UFC, going on their 31st, which will be this Saturday. All right, the styles for this matchup, we've got Max Holloway, obviously strengths. 46% of his wins are by KO. One of the best strikers. I'm the best boxer in the UFC, baby. An amazing striker. Very good at mixing up. Getting in those, he's able to throw those spinning techniques very quickly and with zero space. Like, very good sign for Max Holloway, especially with a guy like Dustin Poirier. He's going to be pulling the shorts up, coming at you Louisiana hot sauce style. Strengths for Dustin Poirier. 53% of his wins by KO. One of the best to ever do it in the UFC. And 2-0 against Max Holloway. Now, the weaknesses. Obviously, for Max, one thing to call out, guys, and this is something I don't think people are talking about enough, is Max did suffer his first KO loss in the UFC and his career pretty recently, back in October. So what I worry about with that is sometimes you see guys in the UFC where they have this legendary chin, but the second they lose by KO, it's like every fight thereafter, their chin is just gone. So I worry about that for Max because we just don't know yet. Like, we don't have hindsight. We can only see what's going to happen this Saturday. We're going to find out Saturday night, baby. Now, weaknesses for Dustin. He can be open to counters and head kicks. He did get KO'd by a head kick against Justin Gaethje. And Gaethje got schooled by Max. So it's like, if you're playing MMA math, it's a little bit worrisome there. But jumping into the momentum, both guys fight coming off of a loss. Max last fought 266 days ago. Dustin, less active, last fought 414 days ago. The last four fights for each of these gentlemen, you got the loss to Poirier for Max, but a 3 or 4 fight win streak prior to that loss. And then on the other side with Dustin Poirier, last 4 fights, he lost to Makhachev, one of the best that we've seen in the UFC. A win over St. Denis, a loss to Gaethje, and a win over Chandler. So a bit hot and cold for Dustin. Oh, shit. Jumping into the intangibles and X factors. So, oh my God, I'm retarded, dude. Can't even fucking believe this. I definitely know it, though. So, obviously, Max is not the home fighter. Dustin is. I just didn't change that to fucking yes. Anyways, the pressure for Max is the pressure to hold on to the BMF belt, but also to not go 0-3 in another trilogy. He's already 0-3 against Alexander Volkanovski. Max has that pressure to get the win, and I think it's a red flag too. He's already gone 0-3 in another trilogy, so it's not like it's foreign territory to him. Now, Dustin, on the other hand, the pressure is very immense. His hometown retirement fight, but they say pressure makes diamonds, and we're going up against the diamond in the diamond's hometown, so we'll have to see if the diamond can be created here or crafted out of pressure. Now, red flags. He's fighting a Max who finally has a full camp and is a savvy veteran at this point. Max, when they first fought, was a debuting UFC fighter. And then when they second fought, Dustin was in the lineup for the interim belt. And I think someone fell out. And then it was Max Holloway stepping in on short notice to go for the interim belt. And unfortunately, Max was just not as prepared. It was Cupcake Max. We're getting a fully prepared Max Holloway at lightweight, tested at lightweight against Gaethje. So I think that that is something that is a red flag here, because it's like, how does Dustin fare with a fully prepared Max Holloway? We're going to have to see. Now, one variable I'm going to call out, guys, and this kind of goes for some of those hometown fighters. It's not to say that Louisiana is like fucked up or whatever, but I do think that when you have hometown fighters in a crowd that is screaming and voting for them, all of those things, those sensory type things, play into the optics of the fight. And I feel like if this is a very close fight, which I presume that this will be a very close fight, you are going to likely have a decision going in favor of Louisiana, which I think we would all agree is not the worst thing in the world, but I do want whoever is the better fighter on the night to get the win, not the hometown fighter per se. If Dustin's the better fighter, give him the W. I am a huge fan of both these guys, and I want to say either one of them winning is a win. And I feel like I have to root for Max because I want the BMF belt around. I want there to be a little bit of that fun style and matchups that where we can get these banger fights, right? Even though that title is not as prominent nearly as the UFC Undisputed belt. Ultimately, guys, I am going with Max the Blessed Express Holloway solely off the fact that I feel Max is going to come into this fight very well equipped, very well prepared, and just going to have that speed and footwork advantage. Now, I think that this fight will be extremely close. I do not see either man getting KO'd, but like I said, guys, Dustin has power. Max just got cracked, so like it's hard to say what happens, but I see this fight going to decision either way, and I'm leaning Max. But like I said, Dustin is the diamond. He could come back, find a way to get a win here, and go out for his last dance with a win. I appreciate if you made it this far. Thank you guys for your patience. I know there were some mistakes inside of my tracker here, but ultimately, I truly appreciate all of your support. Please, if you aren't already, subscribe to Fite Feed so you can stay on top of all of my MMA content, and give this video a like if you enjoyed. Finally, comment below if you have different picks or you're feeling a certain way about any of these fights. I would love to hear from you guys. Thank you once again, and I will see you in the next one.